Welcome to the Midcoast Community Council meeting of October 11th, 2017. Will the council members please introduce themselves?
Chris Johnson.
Claire Toutant.
Dan Haggerty.
Lisa Ketchum.
Dave Olson.
Brandon Kwan.
Don Horster.
Okay, so the first item on our agenda is the Board of Supervisors report and reports from other government officials. And Supervisor Horsley tells me he has nothing new.
I have no report.
Okay, so Harvey, did you want to report on anything?
Very brief. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Harvey Rohrbeck. I serve on the Half Moon Bay City Council, and I have a couple of items which might be relevant to my neighbors to the north. I just came from a special meeting of the Half Moon Bay City Council where we directed staff to find a shelter for homelessness for this upcoming winter. It's probably going to be a big tent, and it's probably going to be for 3 months or so, where the rainy season is going to occur. So the only question is where, and staff is going to be working on that, a few possibilities. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the SFO roundtable. I see it's on your agenda for tonight. I read the draft report letter that you're planning to write, and I'm in full agreement with it. I'm the representative from, I guess, the coast side, certainly from the city, to the roundtable, and I've been going to all the roundtable meetings. So I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that your letter makes a lot of sense, and we hope that the FAA listens. The bad news is that at the last roundtable meeting, there was a memo from Supervisor Pine that kind of quashed the idea that some people had that we could sue the FAA to get them to change their routes. Apparently that's already happened. They tried that when the Next Gen was instituted a couple years ago, and that suit has already been quashed by the Ninth Circuit. So that avenue that some people I know had advocated doesn't seem to be a viable solution. But we really need to keep the pressure on the FAA. We want to put the waypoint out over the ocean instead of over El Granada and Moss Beach. So that concludes my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public comment. If anyone wishes to speak on an item that is not on the agenda tonight. Seeing none. Moving on to consent. We have the minutes for September 13 and September 27th. May I have a motion?
I'll
Council?
move that we approve the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Second.
Are you?
I must abstain because I have to admit I went to read them today, and all day long I could not get to them because the internet is down. So I was not able to read them, and therefore I cannot vote for them. So I'm not voting against them, but I am abstaining because I have not seen them.
So 501. Chris abstains. Regular agenda. So the first item. Oh, here we go. Is the projector on?
Yes.
First item on the agenda is the bulk propane storage facility on Airport Street. This is a progress update on incompatibility, hazardous land use adjacent to medium-high density residential. Hold on, I'm trying to do two things at once. Great. Medium-high density residential Pillar Ridge community, including 2 recent gas leaks. We had a previous report on this last January here, and just to clarify, this is a presentation from the Pillar Ridge homeowners. I happen to be a Pillar Ridge homeowner myself, and there are a number of people here tonight, and so it'll be a little bit different order. I'm going to go through the presentation and stop at a couple of slides for residents from Pillar Ridge to testify, and then wrap up the presentation before we move on to the next step. So. The red dot is the propane facility, and as you can see, it's right up against Pillar Ridge, which has 227 homes. So the explosive hazard here, as explained by Robert Shore, Consulting Environmental Planner, the existing stationary propane tank has the capacity of containing 15,000 gallons of propane fuel. HUD charts show a catastrophic accident would result in a 250-foot fire width and height. Any building within 180 feet would be combustible, and any person within 900 feet could sustain major burns. Explosion blast overpressure for building and people within 560 feet would be life-threatening. In the event of an explosion, since there are mobile homes as close to 75 feet from the stationary tank, most of the park would be subjected to explosive and/or thermal radiation. Note that the stationary tank here is aimed right at the nearby homes. Okay, so the practice of devalving hundreds of tanks rotated in and out of the lot releases the odorant mercaptan, causing unnecessary public alarm and repeated wasted time and resources, as the Pillar Ridge natural gas system must be investigated to rule out any genuine leaks. Deodorant is leaked so frequently with the same explanation that some residents suffer the recurring noxious odor in silence and no longer bother to report a suspected gas leak. Pillar Ridge residents were assured over and over that these smaller tanks were empty and posed no hazard. Turns out that wasn't true. On September 22nd, there was a call to 911, ruptured propane tank. The photo was taken after the 911 call as the explosive leak was tapering off. One large initial cloud drifted north, driving frightened, choking residents from their homes. A follow-up email from CAL FIRE Assistant Chief Cole on the incident, quote, state the first engine company arrived. They met with AmeriGas personnel who were in the process of decommissioning propane tanks stored on their property. They're loading them on the truck to take them away. The crew did not observe, the fire crew, did not observe any leaking or odors of propane and did not see any hazards present. So I would like to call, as part of this presentation, Jose Temez from Pillar Ridge. If you could come up to the podium, and he's the one that took this picture, and to tell us what you saw that day. You're the one that made the 911 call, right? It's just for the TV.
Okay, I think everybody could hear me.
Yeah.
I've lived at Pillar Ridge now for 21 years. My wife and I raised 2 children there. Our home it borders the fence to the propane yard. And from the big tank to our house, it's about 100, 150 feet. But the other tanks that were removed, and some are still there, were as close as 20 feet from my back bedroom. On the day in September that I was in my house, I was doing something, I don't remember what it was, and I heard a loud bang, almost an explosion. So I ran out to the backyard. I thought another airplane had crashed. And I saw this huge white cloud of propane drifting towards the north end of our community at the entrance at La Granada. So I ran into the house. I couldn't find my Nikon. I grabbed my cell phone. It came back out, and I took that photo along with a couple others. Then I ran out to the front to Granada, and my neighbor back here, Alex, he was there too, and he told me what I was seeing, were people running out of their homes with babies in their arms, coughing because of the odor of the propane. I have to say that over the years, that propane yard has, when we first moved in there, it didn't have hardly anything in it. At some point, they filled the complete yard in there with over 250 tanks of various sizes. And almost every week, if the wind was down, you could smell the propane leaking out. They said they were venting. I don't know what that is. And it scared the heck out of my wife to the point where we stopped wondering if it was ever going to be an explosion, but when there would be an explosion. I don't feel comfortable to this day with that propane being there. I have no choice to leave. I'm a cancer survivor, and I have to stay where I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Next we have Alex.
Hello everyone, good evening. My name is Alejandro and I work for Pillar Ridge. Last month, the 22nd, I was working into the laundry room around 9 a.m. The laundry room is right in front of the propane area. I heard an explosion. I went outside to check, and I saw a propane tank hanging. At the same time, I saw like a big cloud of gas. At that moment, I called my radio to my boss, and I told him about the gas leak. I saw the big cloud of gas goes into the first house right in front of the propane area. At first, I saw Blanca running away from her house because the odor was very strong. After that, I saw her mom with the baby in arms. They started their car and they left. So they tried to escape because the odor was very strong. And this is what I saw. Thank you very much.
Emerita? Are you going to translate for her?
Yeah.
Or shall I try?
You want to try? Try.
Emerita? No, come on.
Hello, soy Emerita Arellano, vivo en la traila 101 La Granada. Yo fui la afectada del humo ese que causó eso de ahí. Yo estaba en mi casa, estaba lavando trastes cuando se empezó a ver todo eso, empezó a venirse todo el humo para mi casa. Estaba mi hija tosiendo porque estaba en su cuarto.
Un momento.
Okay.
Okay, so she lives next to the laundry, next to the propane, and she heard the explosion and the gas come in her windows, and I think that's as far as you got.
Así se vino todo el humo para la casa, entonces yo corrí para afuera, prendí el carro y me tuve que salir porque tenía mi baby. Estábamos oliendo todo ese humo, entonces mi hija no podía respirar. Tuvimos que correr para afuera. Cuando yo encendí el carro olía mucho a todo eso, a gas. Antes no explotó el carro ahí. Mucho peligro todo eso, mucho peligro para mí y para mis hijos.
Okay, so she, her daughter, her teenage daughter has asthma, and she couldn't be here tonight. And she was the one that ran out first, and who couldn't breathe. And Emerita, with the baby, got in the car. She left the smell and everything. Okay.
Sí, tengo más hijos. Tengo otro hijo con asma, esa hija que tiene asma. No podía respirar, no se tuvo que meter a la casa por mucho tiempo, por lo mismo que estaba oliendo todo eso. Es muy peligroso. Yo tenía miedo de prender la estufa, porque olía mucho a gas y nada más hoy olía mucho a gas todavía. No podía prender yo la estufa para poder yo cocinar.
Okay, so her daughter has asthma, and she couldn't stay there that night. She couldn't stay there for a number of days. The house still smelled. She's afraid to turn on the stove. Okay.
Sí, no sé, sí me da miedo todo eso. No sé qué se puede hacer para que quiten todo eso porque es mucho peligro eso para mí, para todo alrededor de las trailas.
It's dangerous. She's afraid. She doesn't know what to do. It's dangerous for the whole community.
Para mí es mucho peligro, para todas las personas, para todos, y es más porque mi hija no podía respirar porque tiene asma. Tengo 2 hijos con asma y uno discapacitado, entonces todo eso es mucho peligro. Respirar todo eso es mucho peligro.
Breathing the gas, your kids with asthma, it's just too much danger.
Es todo.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, oh wait, next slide.
I
Hold
just
on.
had a question relative to that. Would that be out of order?
Well, actually, if you're over there, it's not captured on camera, so could you just wait until, yeah, it's your turn just in a minute. Okay, so that was to explain this slide here. So the next event occurred October 3rd. And just let me explain that leaking propane vapor is heavier than air. In calm air, conditions, it flows downhill along ground to collect in low places, such as under a mobile home, waiting for the first spark to ignite an explosion. So the email from Chief Cole for this event said that The October 3 event came in as an odor investigation. Upon the arrival of our engine company, they noted gas leaking from a gauge on the 15,000-gallon propane tank. Our crew upgraded the response with 2 additional fire engines and a battalion commander, and asked for a representative from AmeriGas to report to the scene. So this leak was determined to be operator error, and we don't know how long the tank had been leaking. And so the park manager, resident manager Paul Bowman, is here because to speak. Could you come up to the podium about what he observed that day?
Hello. Don't even say my name or anything.
Paul Bowman.
Paul Bowman. Okay, I'm the park manager here over at Pillar Ridge. And on that day, Alejandro was on duty near the vicinity of the laundromat and the propane yard at the intersection of Airport Boulevard and the entrance to our park. And he called me on his radio to let me know that there was a traffic stoppage, that Airport Boulevard was blocked by fire engines and police cars, and he wasn't sure why. So I came down to investigate and noticed the fire chief was there, and they'd set up a command center, and all of Airport Boulevard was completely blocked off southbound to the harbor. And the fire chief in charge of the situation at that time asked me for a park map as a precaution to see if we might need to turn off electrical connections along several of our blocks. They asked where a gas shutoff valve was, and I communicated to the fire chief that we were available to help them if things started to go sideways for them, and why were they here to begin with. And he let us know that there was gas leak in the propane yard, and we took that photo right there through the fence. Now, when I came back from my office with the park maps for the fire chief, a representative from AmeriGas had arrived, and the fire chief was talking to that person, AmeriGas employee. And I overheard him say to the chief, "There is no gas in that tank. It's perfectly safe." And the chief was irate. And he said to him, he says, "I see the vapor. There's a leak. What's going on?" So that didn't inspire a whole lot of confidence in that company for me. And we've dealt with regular odorant leaks from this yard over the years. And myself and our employee were trained as first responders for gas leaks for the park. And so anytime there's a reported leak or a suspicion of a leak, we're supposed to respond as if there is a dangerous and hazardous situation. And just aside from these 2 recent incidents, it happens so frequently that the residents don't know who to call. Did they call PG&E? Did they call us? Or is it just the propane yard? Let's ignore it. Well, that's not something you're supposed to ignore. It's a very serious issue. And this propane yard being in such close proximity to the mobile home park and all these residents, and being so poorly operated, it's just, I don't know what else to say. It's preposterous to me. I think it's a real safety hazard for us. So.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Oh, my quick question. I was going to ask Marita, or if anybody had considered this, the possibility, if there's a gas cloud coming toward your house, probably not a good idea to get in your car and start your engine. That could be a huge explosive hazard. So.
She realizes that now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to criticize.
But in the panic of the moment and misinformation, you never know.
Anybody could do that, and it could just be,
it's one of those
the
things.
residents shouldn't be put in that type of a situation to begin with, where they have to feel like they've got to do that.
Yeah, she knows that now. Thanks, Paul. So just to wrap up the presentation, the Pillar Ridge families are the sensitive receptors of this carelessly operated hazardous facility. This term comes in the propane safety manuals. The sensitive receptors are, I guess, people nearby that might die. So that's what we are. And since January 2015, we have asked the county to help us, to protect us, to move the bulk propane facilities safely away from us. Any of these events could have been a tragedy. As I say, we had always been told those tanks were empty. AmeriGas apparently told the county they were empty. When that explosion happened and the tank was up in the air and the fire came, the fire department came, the people on site did not cop to the fact that their tank had just exploded. They just pretended they, you know, and then when the large tank was leaking, the representative says, oh, there's no gas in that tank. Well, so, and the question remains, you know, how long was it leaking? You know, and if you were even to question them as to what event might have caused this leak, so how long ago, I couldn't believe them. So can I just have a quick show of hands of Pillar Ridge residents that are here, just to get a sense of, thank you.
One more thing?
Oh, you gotta come to the microphone.
Oh, okay.
And just for those who aren't aware, this is that big propane tank right here, and this is.
The propane tanks that were removed were sitting right on the other side of the fence from Airport Street, exactly at the corner where all of our children wait for the bus in the morning and come home in the evening. The idea that you would have propane where there are families with children, to me, is ridiculous, and I'll tell you why. Barranca, which is where I live, all the way down Barranca, there are at least 12 houses, and all of them have children, newborn babies, toddlers, preschoolers, high schoolers. If that big tank were to go off, as Lisa pointed out on the graphic, all of those people would probably die, and me too. And I don't think the county is ready for that. Thank you.
So, let's see. Does the council have any clarifying questions on the presentation? Chris?
It's not a clarifying question. I would like to ask the chair, I know it's your presentation, if I could add 2 minutes of additional facts to this presentation? Not commentary, but facts.
You think it fits in here?
I do.
Or?
Yeah.
Okay, because we do have Summer Burleson from Planning who has a report to make as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, thank you, Chair, I appreciate that. So the smell that you are smelling is not propane. Propane is odorless. It's methyl mercaptan is the chemical that you are smelling. And one of the reasons that they have those tanks there empty is they are off-gassing methyl mercaptan. So that is something that you need to be aware of, Pillar Ridge residents. It's not just the danger of explosion. You are every day breathing methyl mercaptan. Methyl mercaptan is a colorless flammable gas. Highly irritant when it contacts moist tissues such as the eyes, skin, and upper respiratory tract. Can also induce headache, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, coma, and death. It causes short-term effects. The long-term effects, where is Jose? The long-term effects of being exposed to methyl mercaptan for 20 years, 25 years as a pregnant mother, at raising small children with small children, is not known. There are no studies on what the long-term effect of methyl mercaptan is. So for that chemical to be allowed to off-gas 24/7, and for the residents of Pillar Ridge to be breathing that 24/7 for years, that is a cumulative effect that could be even more harmful to you than the potential explosion of the propane. Methyl mercaptan, in addition as an odorant, so that you will smell propane if there's a leak, it's the methyl mercaptan you will smell. In addition to that, it is used in the production of pesticides, jet fuels, and plastics. So that kind of gives you an idea of what kind of chemical we're dealing with here. This is a highly toxic chemical that is not good to breathe in or to be absorbed by human bodies. The last thing I will say, and Lisa mentioned it, 2 more things, sorry. It is heavier than air, so it sinks to the ground. And then it sits there, and then it either gets absorbed into the ground, and then further down into, it either gets into water runoff and drains out to the slough out here, out to the marine sanctuary, or it goes down into the water table. So I would ask, what is the measured amount of methyl mercaptan, ambient levels in the air, say right now, during off-gassing, an off-gassing incident, in the soil and in the water table? I bet there's no information on that whatsoever. Last point, in 2014, 4 people died at a DuPont factory from inhaling methyl mercaptan. Now, again, that was in an enclosed area, and I imagine super high levels of that chemical. But that is the chemical that killed those people. There was a lawsuit. Those families received money. It is a chemical that will kill you. Now, in high doses, sure, but we don't know what that chemical will do over 20 years, 25 years, at least the lifetime of this propane yard. So those are the facts that I would like to present.
Thanks, Chris. So next, Summer Burleson is here from County Planning, and she's been working on this issue for some time. She has a report to make.
You asked if the council had any questions.
Since I, can you wait till after she's done, and then I'll ask you. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had a question. Come on, Summer.
Hi, Summer Burleson, San Mateo County Planning and Building Department, and I'm here just to provide an update of the AmeriGas propane facility. We have been working with AmeriGas and their consultants since we issued the original compliance issues of compliance letter back in 2015. As of current, the facility has 9 tanks left on site that they have scheduled for transport off site within the next 3 weeks. In the meantime, code compliance or code enforcement division has opened a violation case on the property and will be issuing a citation to them within the week. That provides the standard process for a violation is that the violator, the person issued the violation, is given 2 weeks to address the violation. Otherwise, the Code Enforcement Division can escalate that up to fines. We've notified AmeriGas and their consultants that that is the process that we're moving forward on. I know Fire was not able to be here. They planned on being here due to obviously the Napa fires. But in conversation with them, they did respond to those 2 incidences that Lisa had mentioned, and they had indicated that they are looking into trying to make a requirement to be on site when they do remove the remaining tanks, to have staff, fire staff on site. It would be at AmeriGas's cost to do that, but to have staff on site to oversee the remaining tank removal as well. So they're looking into that, being able to require that as well. And then we are waiting to get a schedule date of when that actual transport will occur of the remaining tanks, and then we would intend to notify the Pillar Ridge site manager of that ahead of time as well for that date. So
is this violation about the smaller tank? What about the leak in the larger tank?
Yeah, so the violation would be for the removal of the remaining tanks, and then in terms of with regard to the large 15,000 gallon tank that's there, the leaking issues would be fire. We would rely on fire to address with the site operators. In terms of its use there, it was established pre-LCP in an M1 zoning district that does allow bulk propane facilities. So it is an existing legal use. It's the expansion that the planning department has determined that it's the expansion that's in violation of the land use regulations in terms of it required a coastal development permit in order to expand that use by having the additional storage on site, and a coastal development permit was never obtained. So their options were to either try to obtain an after-the-fact coastal development permit to try to legalize the storage activities on site, or to remove and abate that violation, which they chose to abate the violation. They will be having to come in for a coastal development permit. We've told them to, the perimeter fencing that's in place also would have required a coastal development permit, as well as the graveling of the area outside of that existing 15,000 gallon propane tank. So basically what we had established was that, looking back through aerial photos and documentation, was that the existing 15,000 gallon distribution tank was established legally. However, beyond that, is considered expansion and requires permits. And so they would need to abate it back to that existing pre-LCP condition or get proper permits. So they are proposing at this point to apply for a coastal development permit to legalize the fencing, the perimeter fencing around there. And I don't know about the gravelled areas that they've created in that area. We've told them they need to restore that area, or they would have to include that in their coastal development permit if they felt that it was necessary for the operation of that tank.
There have been reports of foul odor when rain collects there. Could part of this include some sort of soil testing to see if there's been pollutants poured in the ground?
Yeah, I believe last conversations, I can't guarantee it, but the last conversations we've had with them is that they are looking to permit some of the gravelled areas that they've created in there, but not all of them. And so restoration of the areas that they haven't done, they would need to come up with a plan for restoration. And I know environmental health has also been working with them, the hazmat department, and through the coastal development permit process for the any proposed restoration, we could look into any kind of soil testing from leaking,
So
liquids.
there's no plan to require CDP for the existing 15,000 gallon tank. They're going to be allowed to, that's going to be allowed to remain. Is that my understanding?
That's correct. It was established, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the fact that they obviously cannot be relied on to operate the tank safely, where does that fit in the picture? I mean, I understand the county's policy to grandfather things, the airport overlay, the sensitive receptors and all, but at what point does this become
this equipment?
a health and safety issue that overrides this this is not a question to you. I suppose I should wait and have that in the discussion. But so there's no plan, because I know when this started 2 years ago, there had been discussion of, well, actually last January you were saying the plan was to make it smaller and safer. So I understand the smaller now, but I still don't get the safer. And I had sent a link to a propane organization, their safety manual, and asked what standards would be applied, and have never gotten an answer. I think actually finally I did get an answer from Mark Mondragon, and said yes, they would be using that very same manual. But what we encountered in Pillar Ridge encountered in 2004 when that analysis was made, and we could not get any HUD money for housing there, that in order to mitigate for that tank that's sitting there, you would need this blast wall or I mean, something very elaborate to make the community safe. And the different owner at the time, the propane, they said they weren't interested to do that. And they also said, well, we'd move away if you'd find us a place and permit it for us and pay to have us move our stuff. But anyway, that didn't happen. But, you know, we have more sensitive housing, more sensitive receptors planned to move in next door. And the tank just sits there. So, sorry, I just...
No, I in terms of with regard to the coastal development permit that they would be seeking for the fencing and some of the other miscellaneous stuff, Under that, fire has already indicated that they have informed the applicant that there are other upgrades to the site that they would be looking to require under that coastal development permit just for the site itself.
We have no
in
idea
terms
what
of-
that is.
Right, so in terms of hydrant, looking at requiring a hydrant and some fire safety.
No blast wall or bury the tank, nothing like that.
I don't believe so at this
Okay.
point. We can check in, I would be willing to check in with them though, to see if there's any further requirements that they can make. I know at one point, the AmeriGas was looking at options to try to, I guess, kind of beef up the surrounding of the site by putting in large retaining wall areas or, mound. It's kind of essentially it would be considered an underground tank by providing some kind of above ground mound over it, or kind of trying to drop it down partially into the ground. But I think that at the time we didn't, so they had those ideas at the time. Again, we had established that the existing tank itself was a permitted thing. It was pre-LCP again. It was established back in the 60s through permit. And it was, again, we were focused on the remaining stuff that we could not establish any kind of permitting record for. So.
Okay.
Can I just comment, the original goal but as you pointed out, 2015 was, it had expanded without anybody paying attention to it. And so we decided to take it on and to get them one or two things. We did look at potentially moving it, but
Right.
it's kind of difficult. I mean, we're not a real estate agent, so I can't figure that out. And they certainly had no interest in doing that. So then we focused then on bringing it back down to what it was. I'm not sure what year, but what the original before it did this relatively massive expansion. And I think we've been relatively successful at getting it down. All those tanks that they were storing, pretty much almost all of them are gone now, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe some still.
Correct. There's about 9 tanks left
Yeah, but
that
there
are
were
stored.
a lot more than that we got to get down. But, your comments about how to improve safety, we can work with the fire department. We have to take a look at what tools we have in our little arsenal, basically, I think fire and life safety is probably our best tool, especially because of the way they've operated. And some of your testimony tonight, we frankly were not really, we were aware that people didn't like it, but I don't think any of us were that aware of the amount and the number of leaks that have occurred until.
If it weren't for Jose's picture, nobody would believe us now.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect you're right, yeah.
So nobody is still addressing the methyl mercaptan issue. This is
Well,
all just
okay.
about potential
Okay.
explosion.
I don't know about that one way or the other. But the issue is we're getting rid of all those tanks, and then you still have the 15,000 gallon tank, and we have to continue working with our fire partners to figure out how we could make that safer, or if we can't, maybe we have to take some legal action at some point.
Right, I want to try and get to public
Can I
comment.
ask one quick question of
Sure.
someone? It's a follow-up to your question. So are there other propane facilities or similar facilities in the county that have had safety issues? And is there a precedent for enforcing additional safety inspections or monitoring?
I am not aware of any other propane facilities in the county. It's not to say there aren't any, but
Sure.
I'm not aware of any. I believe this is the only one on the coast side. All of San Mateo coast side from South Coast up. So yeah, I'm not aware of any.
Yeah.
So, if I heard you correctly, it almost sounded like AmeriGas was coming to the planning department to talk about some type of secondary containment system, whether it's half down and below and some kind of a mound or some type of a structure that would constitute a secondary containment with, of course, sensors and everything so that they would know if there was any leaking before it actually left into leaked into the atmosphere. And planning kind of dissuaded them from
No, it
moving
wasn't
forward?
dissuading them. I don't know about the
The other way around.
detections for leaking, but it was early in the process when we had presented the issues to AmeriGas, and were of the initial opinion that that their entire facility wasn't permitted and may need to try to obtain permits. And if they were trying to obtain permits to legalize that existing tank, under today's standards, it wouldn't be, because it's also in the one of the airport runway safety zones. So if they were trying to legalize it today, just as if someone were trying to propose that as a new facility today, they would have issues in terms of policies under the airport land use compatibility plan for the Half Moon Bay Airport. Once we did further research and went back through both permitting records and looked at historical aerial photographs, we had determined that we were able to determine that the tank itself was actually a legal structure, and it was actually the other thing. So technically, we did not have anything to, at the time, to require them to do any further upgrades if it's an existing legal structure. And so it was then the focus shifted to trying to clean up the storage tanks and all of the stuff that we were able to determine was not permitted.
Right, I understand it's two separate issues. One is the sole purpose of off-gassing the
That's not
tanks.
so much an issue now because the smaller
Right.
tanks have been removed.
I understand that, but it has happened, and the second issue is the permitted 15,000 gallon tank. You started to say that AmeriGas was proposing building some kind of a mound?
No, they weren't. The
They were
county,
not?
they're not proposing to do anything other than what they're made to do.
Right, so they're not proposing to do anything to the existing tank that's there, the 15,000 gallon tank.
So the discussion should be about what we can do to make them do.
Pillar Ridge would like the tanks gone, okay? That's what we're starting from.
Understandable.
This 15,000 gallon tank, they have just demonstrated to us that they are incapable of being safe with that tank. It was leaking. We don't know how long it was leaking.
I got
And then
I
they came there and they
understand
said, oh, there's no gas in that tank. You can't believe anything they say. Their workers have been observed smoking on site. And unfortunately, they weren't smoking that day the empty tank exploded, supposedly empty tank. It's just, that's where we're coming from. I mean, the Pillar Ridge people. I'm in two roles here, sorry.
And as Supervisor Horsley said, I mean, we'll look at and we'll work with fire and environmental health. They've both been working with the site operators as of more recently. They've gotten involved in it. And we'll look into our regulations and see from a regulatory standpoint, if there's any mechanisms that we can apply to addressing the issues with the 15,000 gallon tank. We've not, been able to produce anything so far, but, we'll go back and see if there's any other regulations or from either, fire or environmental health.
So basically, if they, through operator error, leave that tank leaking and go away, we don't know how long, that's not enough to shut them down. It has to leak and explode and hurt somebody. It has to.
It would have to be,
Well,
I mean, we'd have to find some kind of violation of
I don't think it's,
code or
I'm
regulation.
sorry, son. I don't think it's that extreme. I think the issue is that we would have to go back and give them some options and tell them that you're gonna have to make this somehow demonstrate that this can be operated safely. If it's not, we'll have to take legal action. And I think that's the only thing we can do.
And short of a legal action, we need to find a code violation.
Well,
So if it's not through planning, you know.
Sorry, I think we would probably base it on a fire and life safety as opposed to one of our codes. I mean, if we can demonstrate that.
This
Look,
discussion is
can I-
good, but could I have the chance for public comment first before we get into
No.
this? No?
I'm sorry, it's your meeting, do whatever you want, sure. I will stop interrupting.
It won't take long. It's just the public, sometimes they get antsy when we don't let them get to speak.
Okay.
So, can you hang around? Thank you, Summer.
Yeah, sure.
And,
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I have no speaker slips, but does someone from the public wish to speak on this item? Just raise your hand. Bill? And Lenny next? And Mike after.
I had a pain. Bill Keogh, Moss Beach. Very enlightening presentation. Thank you all for coming. I have a couple of questions, I guess, for the chair and for Supervisor Horsey that is here. It seems to me that what I would like to hear, and I'm sure the residents would like to hear, is what are the steps and what are the timeline going forward? If I had the sword of Damocles hanging over my head, I'd like to know that it's going to be resolved quickly, or at least have an expectation knowing something's going to happen and what that process is and what that time frame is, so I could be prepared in case something goes wrong. And then the second thing I don't understand, and I don't know all of California law or what have you, but it would seem to me that facilities that house dangerous chemicals and so on, they're supposed to have all sorts of safety regulations and alarms for when there's leaks. So don't they have like sensors that can pick up on this stuff and a little bell goes off so the community next door has a heads up before they have to wait and smell it or hear it? I mean, you're kind of smiling. I guess maybe I'm too naive on this, but it seems to me, Supervisor Horsey, that if those things aren't there, you know, maybe the county should really start to look at implementing those kind of rules in the future. I mean, I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but, you know, images of Bhopal come to my head when big companies take shortcuts for profits, and, you know, it's not until people are hurt that this happens, and it's always kind of pushed off into the neighborhood with the least amount of pull. I mean, I don't want to cause any kind of class stuff here, but this wouldn't happen in Hillsborough. It wouldn't happen even in probably San Mateo. It happens out here because it's kind of the least regulated. And sometimes that's good because you're off our backs, but in safety issues, it's not. So, yeah, I think, you know, working with the fire department is a good thing, but I think the county should take this as, how do we prevent other businesses like this that can actually harm the property next door to them or down the street from them, and what kind of regulations are put around them to make sure that people know that. So, and the timeline, it's like I'm still sitting here going, is this going to be resolved before Christmas or in 2020? Yeah, I know, anyway, it's, please, go ahead.
Lenny?
Hi, Lenny Roberts, Committee for Green Foothills. I've been involved in a lot of land use issues over the years. I've been advocate for Committee for Green Foothills for, I don't want to say how long. I just told Dawn that one of the things on my list before I retire is to get rid of this facility. It really has to go. It is unsafe. It is a public health and safety hazard. It's been demonstrated on very eloquently in these pictures. And I don't care. So when it was first put in, it was a small, I think it was two small tanks to serve Pillar Ridge for local propane, not a big distribution tank. A 15,000 gallon tank is a big tank. there are significant regulations about those. Our group of people that has some houses up at Fallen Leaf Lake have a 12,000 gallon propane tank, and we have to comply with all kinds of safety measures when we put it in new about 10 years ago. So I don't see this one complying with all those measures. So I really think the county needs to sort of change direction and move forward to abate this hazard. It's a fundamental hazard to have this kind of safety issue immediately adjacent to a sensitive population, and there's going to be another sensitive population going in next door as well, where you have a fundamental land use incompatibility. You have serious safety issues with these propane tanks, big ones, and I don't think that talking about how you can build a wall around it or do other things, I think the best thing, the only thing would be to get rid of it as a land use next door to the Pillar Ridge. So that's my strong recommendation. And I hope I don't have to stay in my job for another 10 years.
Thank you, Lenny. Mike? And then Marcia.
Good evening, council members. Mike Ferrara, Sierra Club. Sierra Club has a policy regarding environmental justice. Environmental justice essentially is that we do not expose communities of color and modest means to hazards that the rest of our communities do not have to suffer. I've often looked at that yard and I could not quite understand its proximity to the mobile home park. It didn't seem to make sense to me, especially since there are spaces in that yard, particularly down coast where probably most of their customers are. I also have got the impression tonight that a planning department works within their normal confines, which is zoning and regulations and permits and what have you, rather than the larger responsibility that I think the county has for health and safety and et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's more within the powers of either the board or the county attorney to actually be looking at this to abate this, what appears to be a very clear danger to folks that are kind of helpless in its face. Thank you.
Thanks. Marcia?
Thank you, Marcia Yates, Moss Beach. I'm just, this is a segue into one way in and one way out. I mean, we have this really dangerous facility that has potential for explosion. And how are the people in Pillar Ridge going to get in and out? I mean, there's only one road, there's only one exit, and they're sitting next to this big propane tank. And also, I'm wondering, if it started out as a small thing, how did it end up getting a 15,000-gallon tank in there without any other safety measures around it? I mean, that is clearly, I used to be a health inspector, and we had to do all kinds of different things for restaurants and stuff. And this is just a gigantic propane tank that could explode at any time. And obviously, they're not paying much attention to the leakage. And so I just think it shouldn't be a project that takes 9 or 10 years. And as Lenny iterated, there's going to be another sensitive, hopefully another sensitive thing going on if the Wellness Center ever gets built after being kicked down the road 5 or 7 years. Anyway, thank you.
Anybody else in the public wish to speak? Oh. Jose, make it quick.
Okay. I just want to bring up a few things that I think you're aware of. First of all, several months ago, an airplane crashed on the ocean side of airport. If it had flown another 1,000 yards, it would have crashed either into our mobile homes or into that propane yard. The fact that there's an airport right there, and the fact that the propensity for new pilots, student pilots, has proliferated, there is a good chance that one day one of those student pilots will make an error, and that'll be the end of our park. Finally, a question. Can you research and find out if that stuff that you were talking about is carcinogenic?
I have the information right here from the
Thank
U.S.
you.
Government Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry.
Okay, I'll close the public comment, so now we'll get back to you, Don.
That the original, like I said, is when we first got into looking at this, our first thought was to get back to what it was pre, I don't know, 2004 or beyond. So, after listening to your presentation tonight, I know Lenny Roberts has sent your presentation to both me as well as our county council. I did talk to our county council about what kind of legal remedies we have, and so we didn't get much of a chance to talk. So I will talk to him again tomorrow on what kind of legal action we could take to make this facility safe. It's clear that's what I think it calls for, and we'll explore all of our potential avenues of to make it safer. Do you want more than that? I mean, all I can say, I'm not going to make any promises.
Gone. You want it gone.
You know, first, yeah, I know you want it gone. I know that that's what you want.
Yeah.
I know that. But to do that, I'm going to end up having to sue them.
Other neighborhoods would have the facility to do that.
Well, okay, we can talk about that as well. But ultimately, we have to take a look and see, is there some way that they would be willing to make it safer? Are there, of course, you'd have to ask some people who know more about that stuff than I do. Can you actually, bury it or create some kind of barrier around it to make it safer? Can you require a lot of some things that people have said about alarms? Can you make sure that they have adequate people on site? Other kinds of safety enhancements that they can't willingly make? If they can't, what's our ultimate objective would then be to try and shut it down. But I'll guarantee it will not be easy.
Well,
I will say that we did one thing. We did get it down or worked on getting all of those additional tanks that they store out of there. So it is getting back to what it was prior to its expansion. I don't know about that 15,000 gallon tank.
they did make a big push recently to get those tanks out of there, and that's what they were doing the day that ruptured the tank. They must have banged it into something. And so I don't know whether summer lit a fire under them. All of a sudden, they started moving them out, but because since January, since we talked about this last, they're sort of shuffling them around and bringing some in, moving some. I mean, it's like, but yeah, they're gone now, basically, essentially. But with one big last show of.
Well, you know, it took us essentially 2 years to get to that point. So it's you know, they're not, they don't willingly cooperate.
Right, and I understand that everything takes a long time, but this is kind of urgent.
I get it. I understand.
All right, so our desired outcome on this was a discussion and next steps. So at a minimum, I would ask to have frequent updates of what's going on, because instead of having to ask what's going on, you know, pester.
Okay.
Because, well, at the very least that. Any other
Well, first of all, I probably should apologize to Summer interrupting her. She is, you know, legitimately a person that does planning, has to look at our codes. That I can go a little bit beyond that, because
that's what we were hoping.
Well, that's why Lenny and I talked today.
Yeah.
And I talked to our county council. What is it that we can do that is not in our current code book? So.
Yeah. Think outside the box.
Council?
So I have one suggestion, which is not very helpful, but in some ways, and that's for Pillar Ridge to put up one of those relatively inexpensive webcams that captures photos and keep it trained on that thing and start gathering evidence for every single leak, every time they're on site. And if it comes to legal action, that won't be enough, but it will be helpful. And they are relatively inexpensive.
Oh, I'm smiling at our resident manager because he loves to put in cameras, so that's a thought.
Okay. And you can get relatively inexpensive mercaptan sensors, exactly because it is designed to be able to detect leaks. So you could actually add one on the perimeter fence. Again, not very helpful for the safety, but might be helpful for legal action in the future.
Claire?
Point of information, it's unclear to me whether the original tank was the 15,000 gallon tank or if it was a couple of smaller ones. I think that's what you indicated.
It was 2 tanks that totaled around 15,000.
So the current one was actually not grandfathered in, or?
No, so the original, it was established in '64, and it consisted of 2 7,500 gallon tanks. And then it was, we found county records that in the early '80s that it was, when the parcel was being legalized, that the existing site contained 2 tanks, one 3,000 gallon and one 15,000 gallon. And then it, post LCP, it was the one 15,000 gallon tank, which is there now.
So somehow
that's
that
kind of
got
a progression.
grandfathered in, there was some sort of progression from the 2?
So we look at from the LCP, the date of LCP of when they would have required to obtain a coastal development permit and what was there at that time, and that's what is the existing condition.
It would have been 1976 when the Coastal Act was approved by the voters. Then at that date, they would have been required to get one. It wouldn't have come from the county, but from the Coastal Commission.
From the Coastal
And
Commission.
what did they have then?
So we had a comprehensive historical presentation in January. Those slides are posted as supporting documents for this. And the sequence of events was the propane was put there when the park was built because there was no natural gas in the area. In the early '80s, PG&E ran gas to the park. Park no longer needed it, and but the propane business was Bucks Butane at the time. They didn't want to leave, and so they sued the landowner, and they ended up winning, and they get to keep that parcel. And then it's changed hands a number of times, and more recently it's expanded significantly. But the county, you know, the records are sort of, you know, I guess there was some kind of thing that happened when the parcel changed hands in the '80s, some sort of permitting,
Well, there
but
was-
since then, nothing,
Right.
you know, until this complaint that
Until
we
this,
brought.
right.
The other thing that I wanted to say is, can we get the big wave people involved in this in any way? They seem to have a certain amount of clout.
Well, this is why it came up in 2015, because when the site plan came through to the Planning Commission January 2015, it had a propane deflection wall, so that if there were leaks such as we saw in that large tank, and the gas settler were leaking along the ground, it would deflect the propane from going into Big Wave, and then it would go into Pillar Ridge instead. And when I saw that on their plan, I thought, oh, they're cued into the problem too, but this is not the solution. So that was when I first wrote to you about this. And actually, I did copy Scott Holmes on this presentation, and he couldn't be here tonight, he's out of town, but he thanked me for the work on this. So they would certainly appreciate it as well.
Okay.
Any council further, Chris?
Thanks, Lisa. Lisa and the residents of Pillar Ridge, I appreciate your diplomacy and your patience. I find this outrageous, Donna. I just find this absolutely outrageous. Outrageous. It's not like this yard is down a dirt road and you can't see it. I mean, this has been allowed to happen, proliferate in open view for at least a decade. I mean, I thought there were, you know, some kind of rules here. What kind of inspections are being done? We've been working on La Costanera, which is on the agenda today, for years, and they ended up paying $500,000 in fines. What is AmeriGas paying? It seems like there's some kind of reluctance to hold AmeriGas's feet to the fire here. Their equipment is in horrible condition, as Jose's pictures show, obviously faulty. The gentlemen that are working here, let's leave aside haircuts and everything, are not wearing uniforms. They look like 3 guys that just got pulled off the street handling toxic and explosive materials. And Jose said that right before this picture was taken, they were smoking, so clearly no training there. The equipment is rusty and falling apart. No wonder it leaked. We don't know what's in the soil or what's in the water table. And again, this was allowed to happen in plain view over at least a decade with no fines. We're not forcing them to cease and desist. We're not forcing them to bury the tanks. I don't, and the elephant in the room that Mike and Bill have brought up, and I tried to look up the exact term for this on the internet today, but could not, that this is socioeconomic exploitation. There is a term for it that I can't think of right now. As Mike pointed out, this happens frequently. This is a documented phenomenon where dumps and waste storage sites somehow wind up right next to affordable housing or those that don't have the means to fight back. As I mentioned in January when we had this topic, this would not happen next to Ocean Colony if it were unincorporated. It would not happen there. It would not be allowed to happen in a yard next to some of those houses in plain view over a course of a decade, but it did here, and it's still going on. And so I just don't understand it. It's not fair. It's outrageous. And I guess the last thing I would say is when the residents or their relatives or descendants file a class action suit against AmeriGas or possibly the county for long-term health effects that are resulting from this, give me a call. I'll testify. I've got information on their captain. I've been at these meetings. I've made comments about how dangerous this is. I'll certainly make the same comments because this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed immediately, and it would be if it was located somewhere else. And it's just not right for those people, these people to have to live through this. Nobody else who doesn't live there would be safe or comfortable or satisfied living next to that storage tank. Nobody in this room. And I just, it's outrageous, and I am outraged. And unfortunately, I can't wave a magic wand and make it go away. We have good people working on it, but it needs to go faster. It needs to happen yesterday, before somebody gets killed.
Anybody else on the council?
Well, all I have to say is that I kind of see this as a gross negligence, case, and I mean, in one of your slides back there, it says the fire department reported as a big operational failure, and so I think that if you continue to find this company, AmeriGas, money, they might do something for it if you start enforcing the law, if their bottom line and their profit margin is going down due to all these fines, they might do something, like make it safer or whatever to increase the profits again, if that's what it takes to do it, then, the law should be enforced.
Dan?
I want to echo what Chris said. It just seems that, in this day and age of safety regulations, not enough attention has been given here. There has to be something that can be done. It's just a matter of will of the county, in my opinion.
Anybody else? I just wanted to say, Don, thank you for coming tonight to hear this item. We all appreciate it. And thank you, Summer, as well. And I can't wait to hear.
Okay, let me just address Chris's comments. I don't disagree with you. That I'm just appalled that it just got out of hand. There's no excuses. It just, I think what's happened because the coast was unincorporated, and before we had district elections, I don't think people really paid that much attention to it. So things happened. You could see the way Princeton ended up as like a junkyard, and so we, for the last 7 years, been trying to reverse a lot of that, paying a lot more attention to it, and I do ask for a little bit of patience. I have to say that I've only been a supervisor for 7 years, not for 20, and I wasn't the one that allowed it to get out of hand, but we are working on trying to you know, make, at least address, first of all, get it back to where it's as small as it was initially. And remember, it was initially, and I do remember when it was bucks. In fact, I remember that all the people in Moss Beach had tanks in their backyard as well. So it was at one time relatively important to the whole coast side. It no longer has that, and so we have at least been successful at getting rid of all the older storage tanks. I think I haven't really looked at it lately, but I think that the picture you have, I think it's gone, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not, I might be wrong, it might still be there.
The ones that are left there are pretty
Oh,
old.
the ones that are left are still in bad shape, okay.
Yeah.
But we have done our best to get all of them out of it, get it down. And, you know, I'll work with our county council, I'll take a look at the fire department, see what, you know, it's probably gonna have to be some look at safety engineering and see, is it possible to make it safe? And if it's not, then we probably have to pursue some other action.
I don't know where, but I've been told AmeriGas has a facility in Pescadero.
Not to my knowledge.
I think it was someone at the fire department that told me that. Maybe it's not true. I don't know this
No, they
firsthand.
may have a tank someplace, like somebody may, well, maybe.
Well, that's all they have next to us is a tank.
No, they don't have any 15,000 gallon tank. They might, I don't know what a standard tank has. I have no
I
idea.
think they're
but there's no-
roughly 100 gallons, 150 gallons.
Well, there might be, somebody might have a 100 gallon tank someplace,
Well,
but no,
okay,
there's
I
no
get that.
facility that I know.
Okay. Okay, so we're finished with this item, folks? Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your comments. I think you're right, but.
But I do repeat what I said, we have some good people working on this, Lenny, yourself, Lisa, these are good people that I think can come up with something.
Okay. And I'm going to stay for Kelleck's presentation. Whoa, whoa.
Okay, so next on the agenda is San Mateo County Resource Conservation District presentation on recent and current coastside projects by Executive Director Kellex Nelson. Do you have it on your computer? Okay. So Kellex, if you could be at the microphone.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much.
You too. I'm sorry. I want to talk. All right. Okay. Is there, Dave, is there a thing to advance it, or do you advance it?
No, you'll have to say next, or
Okay.
nod your head or something.
Okay, thanks. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, it's because I have a Linux computer and it doesn't like Microsoft documents.
Oh,
The rest look good.
the rest what?
The rest look pretty good.
Okay, okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kellex Nelson. I'm with the Resource Conservation District, or RCD. Thank you for having me tonight. In the midst of a lot of bad news, I have to confess that I'm in a weird headspace right now, having gotten some bad news just before coming here about the fires up north. So I'm in a really weird space, but I'm glad to be bringing some good news about the RCD and what we do. So thank you again for having me. So we are a special district in San Mateo County. Those are roughly our borders up there, with some donut holes in the middle of it. We've been around since 1939 in partnership with the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. I think in San Mateo County, people either really, really know us and they've known us for generations in their family, or we're this incredibly well-kept secret and they had no idea that we were here all along. I think most of you on this council are familiar with the RCD, but maybe you'll get a little bit more in-depth understanding of us tonight. So there's about 100 RCDs, incidentally, around the state of California. And in San Mateo County, we operate with an annual property tax base that's about $70,000. So everything that we do that I'm going to show you is leveraged from that property tax base. So no, it's not orienting. It looks like some of this is going to be cut off. Well, we'll roll with it. So fundamentally, our job is to help people help the land. And we have a non-regulatory mandate. We're able to provide landowners, public or private landowners, with assistance that's confidential and typically free. The fact that we are able to provide that kind of assistance enables us to get invited onto properties where most other public agencies wouldn't. The county often wouldn't, Fish and Game wouldn't, the Water Board wouldn't, but we can, and we can provide people with assistance so that they can best manage their natural resources. I think one of the things that's key is that because we are created for the purpose of helping people help the land, we work with whatever their values and their needs are, their business model, et cetera, across the landscape. So we work in a variety of ways, everything from just providing technical assistance to actually constructing projects, and I'll get into more detail about those in the next one. The thing that's key is that literally everything that we do is through partnership. We partner extensively on the Midcoast. I'm going to highlight some of that for you in a moment. Okay. So our program areas, we've essentially 4 program areas: water, climate, wildlife, and agriculture. And tonight I'm going to talk about the first 3 of these. Water, of course, is one of the most significant forces shaping the future of California, let alone here on the coast. And on the coast we have, what just happened?
Oh, sorry.
On the coast, we help to ensure clean and reliable water for wildlife and agriculture and people in 2 different ways. One is through water availability, water abundance, water conservation, and the other is through water quality. Okay. So our water quality program is one of the most significant areas of presence in the Midcoast. So I thought that would be of particular interest to you. Trying to ensure that our creeks and beaches are clean is a significant endeavor. We work extensively with the Harbor District, GGNRA, San Mateo County, Granada Sanitary District, and the others with Sewer Authority Midcoast side, and private landowners. In the next month or so, our First Flush program is going to come up. First Flush is the first big rain event of the season, when all of the pollutants that have accumulated over the dry season across the landscape get washed into creeks and come out in these outfalls into the ocean. So we mobilize volunteers who we've recently trained and get out there and crawl around these storm drains and creeks, often in the middle of the night, whenever the conditions are just right, to collect water quality data to give an indication of what pollutants are across the landscape in this area. I also wanted to mention that at our board meeting on October 26th, Brittany Bolke, our water quality program director, is going to be on the agenda to basically be in a conversation about what she's seeing, what she's learning, what she's working on, what we see as next steps having to do with water quality in the Midcoast. So if anybody wants to just come be in conversation with her, that's a good opportunity to do that. And I will send something to this council as well before that, reminding you and asking you to help get the word out about that. I'm also going to leave, I did leave on the table the presentation that Brittany made in some detail to the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Commissioners in June on the work that she's been doing having to do with water quality in Pillar Point Harbor. Can I put this down here? Yeah, thanks. Okay. This is one of the sources of bacteria that we're dealing with on the Midcoast. And there are some very simple projects that we do to address bacteria loading. We do not see any particular land use as necessarily problematic. What we do is recommend best management practices like covering, composting, that sort of thing. Okay, the next one. A lot of our work is actually community development through the implementation of best practices. For example, on Sunshine Valley Road, we worked with a large number of people who board horses or equestrian facilities operators to implement a manure composting facility that is going to provide compost as a resource, keep the creek clean, provided technical assistance to all of these folks, and actually a potential source of revenue while keeping a traditional use in this area so that people still can have horses. Okay. Another program that we worked on, a lot of our focus has been on the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and keeping water clean before it enters the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. This is a project that we did in partnership with San Mateo County, where we worked with 9 different residents, landowners, on basically stormwater management practices on their properties. Starting from the upper left, there's rain gardens, that there's to the upper right, vegetated swales. The mantra being slow it, spread it, sink it, store it for water. Lower right is a permeable paving for a driveway. It's phenomenal. I should have dropped a video clip in where we pour water on a regular driveway, regular pavement, and pour water on that, and it just goes into the ground, and let the soil do its natural work to filter water, instead of water all accumulating in the storm drains and rushing out through the creeks into the ocean before it's been treated by these natural systems. And lower left is capturing rainwater off of roofs and storing it, so that rather than running off of the property into the drains on the side of the streets, it can be reused later for irrigation. And then it's also water conservation in times of drought and low water. Another thing that we've been super involved with on the Midcoast, again in partnership with San Mateo County, is alerts. Some of you are on our distribution list. If you're not, if others would like to be, definitely please let us know. My contact information will be at the end. But there are many people are like me who love dogs, love their pets, and love clean water. And you don't have to choose. So we've been working with dog walkers and dog owners and other animal keepers to give them notices for key times to clean up in their backyard. One of the things that we're finding is that it's not just about a pipe with a pollutant or a factory. Often it's the aggregated, accumulated effect of all of our backyards and what's going on and how we're managing our drainage. And if we just get out before a storm and clean up, or if when we're walking our dogs on trails and it seems like it's just wild nature and it's okay, it's actually a good idea to clean these things up, and there's particular times to clean these up. So we have a distribution list. We send out alerts with funding from the county and from some others. We are going to be further developing our outreach program. And stay tuned, one of the programs that's going to be coming up, we're calling Bark in the Park, where we would like to invite dog walkers to come out with us. We'll walk our dogs with you and talk with you about water quality and what we're learning and what are best practices for dog walkers. Okay. So Pillar Point Harbor has been also a big focus of water quality for us. You see, many of you have seen that sign over by Barber's Fish Trap that's permanently posted by the county, saying that water quality at that beach is impaired by bacteria, yet at low tide there are people collecting filter feeding clams to eat. And you know, we see this sort of thing regularly. People bring, it's a popular place for children and other types of recreation because it's protected from, you know, tides, or excuse me, from currents and that sort of thing. So we've been working with the Harbor District and others for a number of years on narrowing in on the sources of bacteria and what some of the solutions might be. And that's another reason you may want to come on October 26th to our board meetings, find out more from Brittany about what we're finding. Next one. This is an example of a larger scale project. Some of you maybe remember when we dyed the harbor. So you can see the pink and then the neon green, and then the pink in the inner harbor, and then the neon green. And some of you here were volunteers. We had over 100 volunteers over a 3-day period paddling circuits in their kayaks around the harbor to help us measure how the dye dispersed, to essentially do a circulation study of the harbor to understand how bacteria might move throughout the harbor. This is an example of a larger scale project that we do, whereas much of our work is property by property with individual landowners, as you saw on a previous slide. Okay. Also with water resources, we do a lot to reduce consumption of water and reduce waste of water. A big area of focus for us on that is agriculture. The top left picture is doing what is an irrigation audit and finding opportunities for irrigation and energy efficiency on farms that results in improvements like you see on the right, the pipes underground. Often when you look at farms that look just like soil, there's actually very extensive infrastructure underground in many of these cases. Okay. Some of you saw back when this was Nurserymen's, before it was Rocket Farms, when they won the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards for work that they did with us to capture all of that rainwater off of all those roofs and all that impervious surface, and then use that for their irrigation, and then recycle the water that came off of their irrigation and reuse it. this actually, because of this project, they stopped being the top customer, the #1 customer of Coast County Water District, and I have a joke for which they were rewarded by having their rates increased. So that's a tough problem for water districts all around the state are talking about this, how they want to encourage conservation, but when they do, they lose revenue. And figuring out how they're going to grapple with that. But nonetheless, we're able to work with different types of agriculture as well as residences on water conservation. And this isn't the Midcoast, but I threw this in there to give you a sense of, just the breadth of work we do. We're also working extensively in the town of Colma with the cemeteries, some of which have infrastructure that's like 100 years old, and they don't even know necessarily where their pipes are. And so working with them on irrigation efficiency so that they're not irrigating their driveways and their parking lots, and that it's going efficiently to their grasses. This is an example where we recognize and honor the business model. The fact is that cemeteries need to grow grass. That's part of their business model. People, visit their loved ones there and expect grass. So it's not an option for them to let it go brown during a drought. So we try to work with them to figure out how they can continue that. Okay, next slide. So climate is the next area of focus. Sorry that this is translating this way. And in our climate program, we try to, 1, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, 2, literally remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and 3, help the community, the human community, and wildlife be more resilient to changes in climate. So this is part of our mitigation program. So mitigation meaning these are projects that we do to sequester carbon, literally take carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in biologically diverse soil. So increasing the organic material and the microbes in soils has astonishing ability to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The Marine Carbon Project has found that if we increased the organic matter of all of the soils on rangelands in California by 1%, it would mitigate for all of the commercial, agricultural, and residential emissions in the state. I mean, think about that for a second there. That doesn't include transportation emissions, but all those other emissions, if we just improved soil health, that's what would happen. So we see in coastal San Mateo County, where there's a lot of rangelands, an opportunity for agriculture and open space to be part of the solution for mitigating climate. The photo on the bottom right is a program area where we are developing what's called carbon farm plans, which is essentially to work with farms and ranches and open space entities, some of these larger properties, to develop a conservation plan for their property that focuses on everything they can do to reduce emissions and to turn their property into a sink for greenhouse gases. Okay. So one of the things that we know about climate change is the only thing we know with certainty is to expect uncertainty. And so this is in Pescadero, where we're working with the county and a number of stakeholders on addressing the chronic flooding and the damages of flooding from too much water. And actually, I shouldn't say too much water because, in fact, it's not an issue of too much water, it's an issue of too much sediment. But it's water in the wrong place or at the wrong time. And with the next slide, on the other end is we've got fires. Of course, we know this about what's going on right now in Napa and Sonoma that has me so rattled. Historically, the RCD worked with San Mateo County, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, CAL FIRE, and the RCD of Santa Cruz County to develop the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan that was endorsed by San Mateo County. One of the things that's significant about this document is it establishes and designates an area as the wildland-urban interface so that it's eligible for federal funds for fuel load reduction projects. Okay. We also, during that time, worked on a demonstration project. On the right side, you see the Princeton community at the end of Coral Reef Avenue. On the left side is the school district property with the eucalyptus. And so we partnered with CAL FIRE on a demonstration project to show what could be done without having to do extensive permitting. Next slide. And that's this. So even though it may not be cutting down the trees and getting coastal development permits, there's a fair amount of limbing and fuel load management. Nonetheless, that can be done when you've got a dense fuel load adjacent to a dense residential area. So wildlife, in San Mateo County we have, it's pretty extraordinary that it's this hot spot of biological diversity. It's a home to over 40 species of plants and animals at risk of becoming extinct. And they're, in many cases, thriving here adjacent to major urban centers. So there's a lot of pressure on this wildlife. So, okay, next slide, Dave. Some of the key critters that we focus on are steelhead trout and coho salmon, California red-legged frogs, snowy plovers and marbled murrelets, the San Francisco garter snake, that beautiful snake in the lower left, if any of you have ever had a chance to see it, it's extraordinary technicolor snake. So, so we do a number of things to try to give them a fighting chance, particularly restoring habitat. A lot of them will benefit from water features on the landscape. As you drive up and down the coast, almost all of the ponds that you see are not natural. They were human-made and are probably, arguably, the reason that the San Francisco garter snake and the California red-legged frog are persisting here when they're not in other places. Also, oh, I'm sorry, go back to that one. Another, so this is a type of habitat restoration. Another big area of habitat restoration for us has to do with vegetation management. So encouraging native plants and removing or eradicating invasive plants, which I know the Jubata grass is something that this council has addressed and also has asked some other entities to look into as well. Okay. This is also a type of habitat restoration project. This is down in Memorial County Park, and this is one of 8 dams or barriers to fish passage that we've removed in recent years. This one project that we did in partnership with county parks restored over 60 miles of access for coho salmon and steelhead trout to the best habitat in that watershed. That is pretty extraordinary to be able to accomplish something like that in one fell swoop. That's the before and after picture of that dam. Okay. This one is more local. So this is on Frenchman's Creek, and this is within your district, your jurisdiction. See that culvert to the left? To give you a sense of scale, I could almost stand in that. I'm 5'2". So what that was is years ago, people needed to get from one side of the creek to the other side of the creek. So they put they put a road across the creek with a pipe through it so that the creek could go through, and the creek was straightened over time. When you put a pipe through, it changes the hydrology. The water gets faster and it shoots out more, and then it has more power. And it carved away the bed of the creek, so it dropped. That's about 8 feet, that drop. So steelhead trout could no longer make that jump and get up the creek. So what we did is we removed that and restored the sinuosity of the creek and installed a series of step pools so that now the jump that's one of my staff on the right there, Joe, and that's the jump that fish make now. So there's a series of those pools, and if you go out there, you would never know that that was engineered or constructed or intentional. It just looks like a pretty creek with pools and fish jumping up them. Okay. So those are our program areas, but I wanted to highlight a little bit about what we're able to do uniquely. The RCD, we are uniquely capable of working across boundaries in that we are not a landowner who's managing our lands. We're not a regulatory agency that has a mandate for a particular outcome. And so, and this, Gail, I thought you would enjoy having this, and that's your back. You see? No. So, you know, being able to develop watershed plans, convene disparate stakeholders together, find projects that have benefits for fish farms and people that are win-wins are some of the kinds of work that we're able to do. And we're able to bring the incentives, the technical assistance, because we're not a regulatory agency. So we're able to fill a unique space on the conservation landscape. And the other thing that is sort of noteworthy, this also became differently aligned, is that at our last calculation, for every $1 that we receive in property taxes, It leverages $42 in state and federal grants that we bring into coastal San Mateo County that otherwise would not be here, or state and federal resources. In addition to the property taxes, for the last few years, thanks no small part to Don's support, the county has been providing us with $100,000 that has basically enabled us to stay in the black. Okay. This is our board of directors. Barbara Cossey is here and right there, maybe. So I wanted to introduce them to you. Resource conservation districts are created such that we are required to have a board of directors that's comprised of resident landowners within the district. What is often considered to be a conflict of interest is actually a requirement of RCDs, which is that the types of people who would receive the programs are the ones who give direction into what the programs will be. So TJ Glothier on the left lives in Seal Cove. Next to him is Jim Reynolds, who owns Level Lee Farm when you enter Pescadero. Then Neil Kramer, who lives in Montera. Then Kevin Watt, who's on Tomcat Ranch in Pescadero. And then Barbara Cossey, who's in Moss Beach. So 3 of our directors are in the Midcoast area. And I think that that was pretty much what I wanted to say, just maybe wrapping up that we're protecting what we love on the coast without regulations. It's all voluntary and almost entirely free to our constituents. We enjoy working in partnership with many of you and many of the others on the coast side. So I want to encourage you to visit our webpage, but also our Facebook page is where we've posted videos of our projects, various projects that are in construction. And we posted a video the other day of when Brittany was out scoping the storm drain lines at the harbor. So in partnership with the county and with the harbor district, we scoped the lines that are in the jurisdiction of the harbor district and the lines that are under the jurisdiction of the county. And she can talk with you about our findings regarding that as well if you come on October 26th. And that video is also on YouTube. We also sometimes just go out during our projects, and while it's in construction or while staff are out there, we just interview them for maybe a minute. These are not high production, they're on my phone. And we just put them out there so people can see what's going on. Thank you.
Council members, you got anything for Kelly?
I'm going to pass this out.
I think you've got such a cool job in that creek restoration. I imagine that's just thrilling every time you think about it.
I love my job.
Yeah.
I really do. I do. I'm that annoying person always posting on Facebook about how awesome my job is. Another photo from a creek, and I'm like, tough day at the office.
Right.
That's when I'm not neck deep in federal contracts, but yeah.
It's an amazing group.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kellogg Center, whole office, they are just a wealth of knowledge and scientific information. Do a great job. It's fun to work with them. And I have to tell you, I almost feel like I have a BA in biology from being with her and her staff. The project they showed on Piscadero, we were pushed by the local residents to dredge in our section of the roadway. We did. It didn't really solve the problem, but it really led us to a more comprehensive solution. So we went up to the state of California, to John Laird, and asked for specific people to be transferred to be able to work with specific, I guess, the superintendent of that marsh, and we were able to successfully got a new superintendent that helped us, really kind of guided us, and actually guided us and the state to a potential project. Then with our new assembly person and Mark Berman and Kevin Mullen and Jerry Hill, we got the state of California to put $4 million into their budget, and then I put $1 million into our budget, and about another $150,000 to forward this project. Essentially what we'll be doing is really restoring, hopefully, the water quality of that whole marsh. And I got interested in that only because of the flooding initially, but it became much broader because it's potential for all I think it's about 5 or 6 endangered species, some of which I have never seen. What is it? The tidewater goby. I've seen it in a picture now in in a science book, but I've never seen one in reality. But there's also coho salmon potential. I think we have seen some up in the creek.
We've seen them in San Gregorio. Oh, yeah, in Upper Pescadero, yeah.
Yeah, right, and then there's steelhead, there is, of course, the frogs and snakes, and then what's the other, the dusky-footed wood rat. And I've become so, I actually could find their little apartment buildings now. I've become that knowledgeable about this stuff. Well, I didn't know anything about it before. Having come from law enforcement, it was never something I ever came across. So it's been fun working with Kellex. I've learned a lot, and I think we're going to make a significant difference in that whole watershed. So, thanks for
There's
the work.
nothing like the passion of a convert. I love it. I love hearing Don talk about this stuff and referring to all the agencies and the acronyms. It's great.
Sometimes I can actually explain it sometimes.
Thank you, Kellex, for your presentation. It was very interesting when you're talking about the well-maintained soils has the ability to draw carbon out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I was at a talk, they were talking about I know you're aware of biochar, and the biochar also has a capacity of an element of that as well. Could you give us an update on, I think there was a biochar experiment?
Yeah, actually one of those photos was of that experiment. So, so what we did is on Cabrillo Farms across from the airport, Dave Leah, the farmer, was very generous, giving us free reign, basically, where we asked him, we said, we'd like to set up this experiment and do all these different plots that might, ruin your crop. Can we try it? And he said yes. So we tested biochar alone. Biochar is essentially charcoal. It's organic material that's burned a certain way and has certain properties to it. So we tried one plot that was biochar alone, one plot that was compost alone, one that was compost combined with biochar, and one that was a control plot. And then tried to measure all aspects of this. We did not measure the carbon sequestration because that is so well documented internationally, it wasn't necessary. We were more interested in, although we did get some data about that nonetheless, but we were particularly interested in the additional benefits of biochar on water quality and the ability for farmers in conventional Brussels sprout row crops to apply less fertilizer or other soil amendments. And its potential to, because it gets charged, biochar gets charged with that stuff, and then it persists. It doesn't pass through into the groundwater. It stays in the soil, and then it's available to the plants longer. So we also looked at the cost benefit of this. What is the total cost to the farmer of disrupting his activities and doing this? And then what is the total benefit in terms of crop yield later, or reduced costs of reduced fertilizer or pesticide applications? So they were largely inconclusive results because it wasn't a lab test. It was a field trial, which means that we didn't stop his operation. So there were things that there were variables that we couldn't control that we would have in the field. So I think we got some informative data from it, but it wasn't entirely conclusive. But I still think that biochar is a recommended practice in many cases.
Does Dave have an opinion on it at this point?
He wasn't, he didn't have I think a big opinion about it. It didn't have a significant impact on his production. Biochar tends to have a much bigger impact on the production when they're severely depleted soils. Yes. One of the things that it can do, particularly on that farm where there's sandy soils and clayish soils, is it can improve soil uniformity. So it can make sandy soils lose less water through them or hold water better, and it can make clayish soils receive water better. And so that can result in having more uniform distribution of water, which can help you irrigate less or more efficiently, so it can have water conservation benefits. So I think that if this had been something that was more long-term, if it had a different type of funding, we could have explored that more. Now we're focused a lot on compost application, particularly in partnership with Tomcat Ranch, where we're doing a lot of demonstration field trials and data collection with a number of partners.
Anybody else?
I wanted to point out one other thing also that we're doing in this area, which is right here. So when Granada Sanitary District applied to become Granada Community Services District, we entered into an MOU with them that says that they would not be another special district that does resource management, so we would be their partner for resource management, natural resource management. So the first foray into that is we have begun developing the resource management plan for the Burnham Strip property. So we completed a resource assessment, has some preliminary recommendations. They created a committee that's working with us. That's Barbara Dye and Leonard Warren. And we're focusing, our preliminary recommendations are focusing on weed management and native plants vegetation. And that was an outgrowth, Lisa, of your efforts around Jubata grass, and then wanting to develop a policy, which turned into engaging us, and it turned into actually a resource management plan.
I can say one thing. I've been on the board for a few years, and I've participated in the water quality project where
Barbara, could you come up to the microphone?
Sure.
Otherwise it won't be captured.
Yeah, so my home in Moss Beach has a collection system, so rain goes on the roof, and then the water goes into barrels, and then when the barrels fill, then it goes into a water garden, and then back into the ground. And for me, just as a Moss Beach resident and a California resident, and knowing that water is one of the biggest issues in the state, and water conservation and recharge of groundwater and keeping the ocean clean for the fisheries and for the marine reserve, that project, I just love that project, and I would love to see that implemented all over the county so that the water goes clean from the roof into the ground, and it doesn't just sweep across the pavement and gathering pollution from automobiles and agriculture and cigarette butts and everything else and sweep it into the ocean. And I just love that project and would love to see it spread all over the state. But I'm just really proud of the RCD for having participated in that and showing a model. And I always get questions from people on the street about that project. And it's just a really easy one to talk to. And if there's any way the county can move forward with the results of that, it would be just a great thing for the county, especially also in Moss Beach, because some of our water comes from groundwater, doesn't it? In Moss Beach? Yeah, so it would make perfect sense for coastal San Mateo County is to recharge our groundwater. So, sorry. So thank you, and thanks for hearing us.
Anything else? A request? Yeah, so I have a request that you help us be a less well-kept secret. So, I can't present to every citizen on the coast, but I can try to get the word out here and there. But I'm not presenting all the time because we're doing the projects a lot of the time. We're providing the assistance. So, yeah, if you could just help be ambassadors or engage us when appropriate, or refer people to us, or help improve our visibility, that would be very welcome. So.
Are you still looking for a volunteer to help you with your data?
Yeah, well, one person responded, but I think we could probably use another. What he's referring to is I asked some folks on this council to help me find a volunteer. We're really interested in, we're constantly interested in improving the transparency of our agency. And so we would like someone who can help us take all of our records of our board meetings and make them available online. And so we don't have the resources to pay for that, for a staff person to do that. So we contacted the League of Women Voters, Coastside Democrats, Midcoast Community Council, and I guess somebody posted it on Nextdoor for us. Did you do that? Who did that? You did that?
I'm not sure who did it, but it was posted.
Well, whoever posted it on Nextdoor, thank you, because somebody reached out to us from that, but we could use another volunteer. Thank you.
Contact you?
Sure. Thanks. Claire?
I have one question. Have you been outreaching to the schools, the high schools in Pescadero, here in Half Moon Bay and so forth? Not only for volunteers, but get students that might be interested in helping out with some of the things. And definitely biology and chemistry students who are doing projects and things like that, because we have a lot they can do.
So the question is, have we reached out to the schools to see if the students could help us? The short answer is yes. The longer answer is it depends when we have funding to do it. Our funding is extremely restricted and restrictive. We have had a very, very low rate of return on our outreach efforts to the high schools. In fact, this particular project, I called 2 different people at Half Moon Bay High School and left messages asking them to help me figure out how this could be characterized as a community service project, and never got a call back. And we have gone to career fairs and done other programs with Pescadero High School. And then years ago, we got a full scholarship. There's an annual program at UC Elkis for, it's called Range Camp, with all these different natural resource management experts who come in and provide students from all over the West, coming from Hawaii, Alaska, all over the West, with experience and exposure to career pathways into resource management. And kids showed up from Arizona and Alaska, but the ones from Pescadero that had a full scholarship couldn't get a ride, didn't make it. So we haven't been really successful in engaging the high schools. We have, when funded, done some programs in Farallon View and some of the elementary schools, and we've had a lot of success being welcomed there for Oceans Week and that sort of thing. And when it was funded, we ran a watershed discovery program at Moss Beach Ranch, where we started at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve and worked our way up to the equestrian facility, and worked with the county and with the private ranches on teaching students about water quality monitoring, and land management, and the relationship between land use and oceans. So we did that for a few years, but we haven't been super successful in getting responses from the high schools.
That's true, yeah. Well, send me an email and we have to help you with that.
Okay, thank you.
Because I work with the high schools and the middle school on STEM,
Right.
computer science.
Right.
And I'm really happy to do something to get the kids
Thank you.
off away from the computer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Kelly.
you.
I'm going to take off after
Early morning.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Feel better, Don. Yeah. All right, we're halfway done.
No,
Well, then we'll be done at 11.
Oh, here we go. I got it now. Sorry. Next item on our agenda is public coastal viewing area at La Costanera Restaurant per the consent agreement with the Coastal Commission. So what I wanted to do, we didn't get to have this on our agenda. You know, the council has commented over the years on La Costanera, and last spring the Coastal Commission reached this agreement with the restaurant on fixing all that. So the plan, as Ellie reported a few weeks ago, the Planning Commission heard this on September 27th, and it was the use permit amendment that we've been hearing about for years, and it was approved, and this all comes as a result from this agreement they have with the Coastal Commission. Basically, since the Planning Commission meeting the same day as our meeting, and their staff report was the first we saw the actual plans for these coastal access improvements that they're going to do there, because this has been this was an application submitted by the property owner to the Coastal Commission staff, so we hadn't seen it. So the first it was on that, in that staff report, and I did send comment to the Planning Commission And it was very closely tied to previous things that council had approved, and so, but I wanted to do an after-the-fact approval of that here tonight, and also fill you in on, I know I posted the staff report, the link to the staff report for the Planning Commission online, but it's very long, and so I just want to pull out some main points from it, those of you who remember all our letters over the years on the restaurant. So this use permit amendment legalizes the lower patio, the one that's there at the top of the staircase, and then they will demolish the upper patio, and there will be no change in the number of seats. They will install public access improvements in compliance with the March 2017 Coastal Commission consent agreement, including trail improvements, public viewing areas, and landscaping. They will install downward directed path lighting in the parking lots and construct new roofing over the outdoor work trash area. The plan for the improved coastal access with 3 public seating, view areas, and bike racks. So I just put the red line in here. This is the main thing out of that staff report. So they're going to, you can see on the left is where the trail cuts through from the State Beach parking lot, and it goes through the landscaping there instead of, it's better. And then they'll have a crosswalk through the parking lot and go along and past the restaurant and north of the parking area and have a, so there's 3 viewing areas, 2 to the south of their patio and 1 all the way at the north end next to the dirt lot. And the bike parking is there near, close to the staircase.
And one of the viewing areas is where the upper patio is being demolished.
Yeah, one of the viewing areas is there. So, and then this is a partial list of the use permit conditions of approval. It's a term of 5 years with annual administrative reviews. It's subject to the issuance of the CDP amendment from the Coastal Commission. Basically, that means even though the county's approved this amendment, they can't do anything about it yet until the Coastal Commission approves the CDP amendment. And that is currently under review. And I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. Okay, so this is the partial list. So exterior lighting, minimum necessary for safety, removing the parking lot floodlights, employ warm colors.
Thank you.
Storm drain, sewer connection modifications to stop restaurant waste flowing to the ocean. Assign restaurant staff to monitor use of state parks property exclusively for public parking and not by restaurant patrons or employees. And the riprap repairs, this is supposed to be the property owner to work with State Parks and the Coastal Commission and submit a plan within 1 year of the final approval of this use permit amendment. If this all sounds interesting, you want to delve deeper, the staff report's posted. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Okay, so then we get to the part where this was on the agenda, and here's these plans, and I wanted to comment. So this is what I sent, and I didn't understand what the approval process would be for these actual coastal improvement plans, although it was on the Planning Commission agenda. So I sent it to them, and also sent it to the Coastal Commission staff people that I'm aware of that have been working on it. And then I copied the county planning people and state parks, and Mark Massara, he's the applicant's representative. So I hit everybody because I didn't know who was going to do it. And this is what the email said. Midcoast Community Council wrote the Coastal Commission in March 3rd, 2017, supported the consent agreement with follow-up concerns April 12 regarding the riprap. You may recall that riprap presentation that we had here that we sent off to
Bless you. Excuse me. Bless you again.
So the email said, MCC supports the public access improvement plans included in the Planning Commission 927 staff report with the request for additional consideration of the view blocking riprap and landscaping as illustrated and explained in the attached slides. The plan proposes existing vegetation to remain west of the coastal trail at the viewing areas. There is no mention of the view blocking riprap boulders on top of the bluff at the seating and parking view areas and large view blocking non-native shrubs invading the riprap or the degraded landscape conditions in this area increasingly infested with noxious weeds. Noxious weeds means the top worst 5 weeds that everybody's supposed to get rid of, poison hemlock, fennel, thistle, whatever. Riprap extends onto the top of the bluff far beyond where needed for erosion protection, blocking public access and views. Planned cross-section of the riprap are conceptual, showing an even, gentle slope, but in reality the slope is much steeper along the bottom and more level along the top. The red line marks the upper reach of armoring boulders in front of the restaurant, which has no view obstruction. That's a slide right out of our other presentation that we sent to them. The area seaward of the restaurant patio is clear of view-blocking boulders and tall shrubs. The same should be done for the public viewing areas and oceanside row of parking. You can see the arrow points at a person in the rocks. That's where you have to go in order to see down to the surf line. Beach visitors, whether seated on the proposed viewing benches or in their cars due to cold or inclement weather, want to see the sand and surf zone. Currently, they have to stand and walk through the boulders and the weeds in order to see over the riprap needlessly placed on top of the bluff. Sightline to the shoreline from benches and seaward row of parked cars should be cleared of boulders. Landscaping west of the restaurant and parking lots should not block beach views. So I did get answer back from Nancy Cave at the Coastal Commission and about how this is going to be approved, and she said as far as she knew that a complete application hasn't been turned in yet, that they're still working on it, and that she would add us to the interested parties list, and will consider the Midcoast Community Council comments when we put together our recommendation. Now I interpret that to mean when she says when we put together our recommendation, that staff will put together a recommendation and that this will go before the commission. That's how I interpret that. So that is my presentation, and like I say, the desired outcome here is that the council approve this after the fact comment that I sent.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is that a vote, Brandon?
Yeah.
Are you tired?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, 6-0 approved.
Thank you, Lisa.
So the next item is San Francisco aircraft noise over the coast side. This is Chris.
Okay, so I don't have a presentation, but I just wanted to give a quick background on the letter because I had some people ask me some questions or make some suggestions for additional stuff or changing of the wording. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We're not experts on aircraft or aviation. We did have an excellent presentation provided to us, and so from that, and in addition to the voices that I've heard from the community, that this is a problem from the community, I felt that it would be a good thing for the MCC to support the community on this and also support the SFO Airport Community Roundtable and the Select Committee as well. Based on the presentation that we saw on, I believe it was the 13th, yes. What I've done is essentially written a letter that says the MCC supports both the Select Committee and the Roundtable, supports the recommendations that the entire body of recommendations that came out of the Roundtable, and then specifically the MCC supports the Roundtable's following recommendations, which would benefit the Midcoast and which are currently under FAA evaluation. So, at the presentation, we received a document that had, from the master list of recommendations by the SFO Airport Community Roundtable, there were about 16 or 18 that specifically applied to the Midcoast. And of those 16 or 18, there was about however many bullets here, 12, 13, that were still under evaluation by the FAA. So I felt that those would be the relevant recommendations to specifically call out and support here. And these bullet points are taken directly out of the document that was presented at the meeting on September 13th. Per Lisa's guidance on that, that's why they are italicized, to show that this is a direct quote from that document. So that's why wording wasn't changed in any way. I did add a couple of seeks where there was obvious typos, just added those in. But other than that, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. These are the recommendations that specifically apply to the Midcoast and are still under FAA evaluation. So that's the basis for this letter. Questions from, I don't know if you're leading or questions from the
I
council?
move we approve the letter as drafted.
I want to propose a one-word deletion amendment.
Yep.
And that's to remove the word anecdotal for the people who spoke. I don't think they're anecdotal since they spoke for themselves.
Okay.
And I think it'll make it slightly stronger.
I'll withdraw my motion, we can start over.
Okay, I'm fine with that, council.
So,
Okay, fine.
I'll move we approve it as amended.
Does anybody else have questions, comments? All right.
Okay. Do I have a second? Okay, all in favor? 6-0. Approved.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. Anybody have council activity to report?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. With several other council members, I attended the September 28, 2017 GCSD Parks Advisory Committee meeting. Now that was a bit of a kerfluffle there. That group, which does not have regularly scheduled meetings, which is one of the things I've always complained with them about, had a meeting scheduled for that Thursday night here, but unfortunately, because they are not on a regular schedule, the room had been double booked. So as I rolled up here at about 7:31 for the 7:30 meeting, there was people streaming out of the building, some very upset, others not so much, saying, go to the Comfort Inn, we're going down to meet at the Comfort Inn. So I drove down to the Comfort Inn, and by the time I got there, which is only like 5 minutes later, there was already about 30 people in the room, in the main conference room there as you walk into the Comfort Inn, meeting already in progress. So I don't know what actually happened up here. I never made it up to this floor. I've heard various accounts that it was ugly, that it was whatever. So that's an issue that I think the Parks Advisory Committee needs to look at. They need to have regularly scheduled meetings and make those known. It also brings up the larger issue of there's just not enough meeting space on the coast side. We need more meeting spaces.
I'd like to point out that the government body who had a required notice meeting here by moving, that's a violation of the Brown Act. And I don't know the other group, how that was determined that that should be the group to leave, but that doesn't seem right to me at all.
Especially since this was the GCSD meeting room.
Yeah.
Like I said, I didn't actually make it up to the room because I saw everybody going. I want to go to this meeting. I've heard several people tell me accounts of this, what took place, and it didn't sound pretty. However, what I feel that part of the problem was that, yes, technically I think there was a violation of the Brown Act. I will say that the PAC doesn't have anybody sitting on it that is on other boards or committees, and so may not understand fully the boundaries of the Brown Act, and I genuinely believe that they felt that they were doing the right thing by finding another meeting space and moving the meeting there so that the meeting could still go on, as seeing as how there were 30 or 40 people. There was no intention to purposely violate or deceive or be non-transparent.
So did they move just because there's not enough room here?
There was a meeting already, there was another meeting scheduled, and the people that were organizing that meeting apparently had more influence, clout, or whatever, and were able to.
It was promised to the group.
Yeah,
that kept
it was a double booking.
It was
We
a
don't
double
need to
book.
go into what happened.
Yeah, that's not the point. The point is that we need more room, and the meeting got moved down to Comfort Inn. It lost some people in the move, and some other people that were there were very upset and distracted by what had happened here and weren't able to fully focus on the meeting. There was about 40 people there, including several children, and that the meeting was basically to discuss proposals for GCSD parks action, specifically a pump track, and there wasn't really much resolution from that. There was a lot of talk of supporting the pump track. Why do we need a pump track? The bottom line that came around every time somebody said something about the pump track was, there's going to be the Quarry Park meeting next week, next Tuesday, that's October 3rd. That county's considering that for Quarry Park, so those are the people you need to talk to. So the upshot was people were miffed at having to move, and we need more meeting space. Then on October 3rd, I attended the Quarry Park meeting. There was about 100 people there. I saw several council members there. It went surprisingly well. They broke up into tables and the people that came were told to work it out amongst yourselves. 10, 15 people at a table, work it out. I thought, we better get the sheriff because there's going to be some brawling. But in fact, it was a social experiment that worked, because what I took away from that is when you have an entity like county or something, and you've got the citizens and they're facing this entity, they're outraged and they're throwing their outrage against an entity. It may be a person standing there, but they're really mad at the entity behind that person. But when you bring the people together and they sit down, and now you're talking to another person that may be your neighbor or is not with the county and doesn't, is just another person like you, it was amazing how the tensions got ratcheted down. I was shocked and pleasantly surprised. And I believe, Dave, check me if I'm wrong, I believe that option 1 got the most, no?
Oh, they got
the most support?
Of the informal reports, yes.
Yes. And option 1 has a pump track up on the level area right as you enter Quarry Park. I believe it has an enclosed dog area as well. Was that option 1? So those are the 2 main features of option 1. Other options had the pump track over in Murata West, and option 3 did not have a dog park. That's it.
Anybody else?
I want to make a report on that October 3rd meeting as well. First of all, I had heard from at least one person in the community who thought I was trying to shut people down at that meeting, so I want to apologize for that.
Really? I did not. I was there. I did not think so.
Doesn't matter. Somebody thought I was, and that's all that's important. So, and I did talk to Sarah and Sam Hertzberg. Sarah is the acting director. Sam is their operations guy. The intent of that meeting originally was to present or come up with a preferred plan. There were a bunch of people at that meeting who had not heard anything about the Quarry Park master plan process and were rather verbal about it and upset that they hadn't heard anything and upset that things were going to change. There were requests for more public meetings from that group and some from other people.
One of the GCSD directors, I believe.
It doesn't really matter who it was. I know that some of the people who were there had never heard of the process before. Anyway, they are considering that. It's very clear that a lot of the people there did not understand the difference between a master plan and a design plan or a construction plan. If there is another public meeting, there'll be a discussion about that first. One other thing that I announced near the end of that meeting was for anybody who hadn't heard of it beforehand or anybody who had, they had ideas on how to publicize these things to let me know. This is the same thing that's happened with the MCC is people go, wow, I didn't know you've been discussing this for a year. And so unfortunately, nobody has come up with any suggestions, but if anybody is watching this video anytime in the next 5 years, assuming I'm still on the council, or even if I'm not, and has ideas, let me know. My contact information is on the MCC website. But anyway, so it's pretty clear that, so all these alternatives really don't have any impact on the master plan. The only impact it would have on the master plan is whether something is listed as desirable or not. The location would not be part of the master plan. So anyway, I am the council's representative to that, so if people have issues and are watching this or hear about it, contact me.
I'd like to add to that, I did get a call after the meeting about, from one of the people who had never heard about the meeting before, and they felt that direct mailing was called for, and we had a quite lengthy conversation about public outreach and the challenges, and you know, I know every year at our retreat we have public outreach on there, and it's this quandary of try as many avenues as you can, and I know it was recommended to us early on that direct mailing anymore doesn't work. People get it in junk mail, they throw it out, and it's very expensive. But it is disheartening to hear this when, you know, I work hard on, I wouldn't even be on Facebook if it wasn't for just maintaining the MCC Facebook, and then, of course, you got Nextdoor, you got all these ways to put it out there, and, but there's so many people who don't hear it, and every project, even now Nextdoor now, is going on about the restoration at GGNRA, and I don't know what the answer is, but I guess we just have to keep trying to get the word out on things. I have a couple of things that I should have said earlier in the meeting, but I just want to get these out here. So a reminder, the Broadway Street End Improvement ribbon cutting ceremony is Wednesday, October 18th at 11 a.m. Should be fun. Sit on the benches. And also, one more announcement on the MCC vacancy for a term ending November 2020. The deadline to apply for appointment by the Board of Supervisors to fill the vacancy is October 20th. A link to the application is on the MCC website, midcoastcommunitycouncil.org. The MCC will interview the applicants at our regular October 25th meeting. Does anybody have anything else? Are we ready to adjourn?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we got the first half done.